so I was involved as a teenager in a program called Toronto Brigantine. I grew up in Ontario. And so I got into that sail training program. Kept me really busy on the weekends, which was great. And I'm sure my parents appreciated it as well. And it had a progression program, right? So the more you learn, the more you progress through the program. And that's kind of what got me into the maritime industry.
Yeah, I can speak to that same topic of how I got into the maritime industry because I have a bit of a unique path that I took. But I did, it's Elizabeth Charmley, naval architect speaking here. I did grow up sailing as well on the harbor near our home. And I have an older sister and a younger sister, and they didn't like sailing so much. But for me, I just fell in love. And despite the rainy conditions on the Pacific Northwest, sailing really captured my heart. But as I got older, I couldn't quite figure out how sailing translated into a career. And when I started university, I actually studied anthropology, and I have a degree in anthropology before I became an engineer. And as I was finishing up that degree, I started to think, okay, what am I going to be doing for the rest of my life here? Am I going to be working, in a university? Am I going to be flipping burgers? Am I going to be, what exactly am I doing with a degree in anthropology? What is this going to lead to? But I still knew I really liked ships and sailing. And one of my coworkers where I was working said, oh, I know a naval architect. And I thought, oh, a naval architect, that sounds like something in the military. I'm not quite sure if the military is for me. What does he do? And she said, oh, he designs tugboats. He works designing ships. And I thought that sounded really cool. So I met him, and I met their offices, and that was at Robert Allen Limited here in Vancouver. And I went down and met Chris, and I was absolutely, again, just smitten. I thought, this is great. This is the place for me. And they encouraged me to go and study naval architecture at Memorial University in Newfoundland. And that's 5,000 kilometers away from where I currently was living. And I was in my early 20s at this point. I had, a boyfriend, an apartment, a job, a car, all these things that sort of propel you into life. And I was like, oh, I can't give all this up to move 5,000 kilometers away. And they asked me, how serious are you about this? And I said, oh, okay, I don't know. And then they asked me, do you have a resume on you? And I said, I happen to, because where I was currently working, they were sunsetting that position. A nice term for they were laying people off, but that was the case. And so I gave them my resume, and a couple of days later, it was Robert Allen Limited, the company there. They called me and they offered me an apprenticeship. And so I worked there for 2 years apprenticing under a naval architect before I ended up taking the leap and actually moving to the East Coast of Canada to study naval architecture at Memorial University of Newfoundland. And so when I completed that degree, we did work terms throughout, and I didn't want to go back into ship design. And I thought there's got to be more than just designing ships and going through the same design cycle process. We did work terms. And at that point, I had worked in Halifax and Norway. I came back to Vancouver. I'd been to Toronto. I'd had a lot of experience designing ships. And I thought, what could be the next step? And that's when I heard about Seaspan Ship Management in Vancouver, and that I could be an engineer, a naval architect, supporting a fleet of operational vessels with technical advice and input. And so I started working there in 2011, and I've been there ever since. And it's been a very interesting career choice to make, because you are supporting assets that are live and operating all the time. So it's not a stagnant job, it's very dynamic. And I travel regularly to visit the ships when they're in dry dock or requiring maintenance. And a lot of the challenges we face are very unique there. So yeah, that's how I got into this career sector.
Hi. My field as a lawyer is in maritime law, so I have always been involved in transportation, but I have to say that my career had a new starting point when I discovered sustainability as a business strategy. It made a total difference. So I used to work on the corporate side in transportation, and now I'm working on this initiative, Green Nautical Miles, an initiative that promotes sustainable practices in the maritime industry. Well, I have to say that I was born in a city by the sea, whose economy depends basically on tourism and port activities. So it was always in my DNA. I have always practiced sea sports. My sister is a captain, so it runs in the family, I suppose. My field, as I mentioned, as a lawyer is in maritime law. So yes, I can say that I always envisioned a career in this sector.
Great, I'm happy to jump in. So I'm Melanie Nadeau, and I'm the CEO of the Center for Ocean Ventures and Entrepreneurship. So I was just thinking back when you asked the question, where did my career start in the maritime space? And it's over 25 years ago. So I'm from northern Quebec, a small town up there, and where it started, I guess, 25 years ago was I had decided to join the Navy because I was looking for an opportunity. I don't think that I was necessarily looking for a maritime career by any means, but I was looking at, supporting myself through school, trying to travel, getting a job. And so I spent the first couple of years in those primitive days, in part being at sea. So learning what that was like, what the military was like, and making a bit of money. And at the end of the day, had decided, well, this is not my long-term career. So I went and I did engineering after that. But needless to say, it had a big impact on me because it taught me a lot of skills. So one, the respect for the oceans. Two, also a lot of leadership skills, having gone into the Navy. And then my career really for probably almost decade and a half was not really in part in the ocean space. I've been involved in clean tech for quite a long time, so different aspects of clean tech. And the last 8 years is what brought me here, or 10 years ago, it's what brought me here to Atlantic Canada. So I'm currently in Halifax, and I worked with a business. And the original reason why they brought me over was I had done a lot of work on offshore energy, both in Canada and around the world. And so they brought me over to look at different investments and the company that I was with, and also to look at different technologies and whatnot that were being invested in. And that led into a 10-year business path to where I land now, where I've started with Cove this fall. And really what Cove does for me, it lines up a lot of my passions, which is the business side, the going back to my roots and being surrounded by the oceans and people who have also a strong passion for that, and in advancing technology. And what surrounds that in terms of advancing technology. So that's how I landed here today, but it hasn't been a straight path by any means. And I didn't know from day one that this is where I'd be today, quite frankly.
So I'll have a bit of a different focus than a lot of the great talented people that we've been listening to today, because my career most certainly has not been a 20-year history. I'm not familiar or from a background in operations, particularly on the maritime side. I'm an executive search consultant. I'm a recruiter. I've been doing HR work for 25 years, and I've had the pleasure to work with BC Ferries for the last 3.5. And I think many people who come from prairies like I did, having grown up in northern Alberta, you don't necessarily think of the scope and the magnitude of the maritime industry globally. And I think if this panel can introduce some young women to the breadth of what exists in careers that are tied to the marine industry, then I think that's a phenomenal opportunity. It's an odd industry because, to me, so many people come into the Navy industry because their dad was in the industry, or they live in a port city, or it's a family thing. It's almost like this hidden community of people who kind of find out about it from like this undertone of career planning. And so I think demonstrating the diversity of the career and the opportunities that exist really strengthen to broaden the skills that I think a lot of young women can bring to that industry in very different capacities. We have operational people here, engineers, lawyers, people running companies, HR. So I think, when you think of the naval industry or the naval and the marine industry as what you could do, really the sky's the limit, and the breadth of work that you can do in that industry is not limited only with what you think you can't do.
That's absolutely perfect, because one of the things I want to touch on is the breadth of the industry, because I am not from the marine sector. My background is not in the industry. So I am curious to understand what are the variety of careers. And I don't want to get into the negative immediately, but one thing I wanted to touch on in terms of the challenges that we face when we're trying to get women into the industry is, what are the big misconceptions about the sector? How is the sector advertised and promoted in Canada? And how do you see that as a challenge to bringing young women in? What are they doing or what are they not doing rather, that is not encouraging women to join the sector?
Well, I think, like I said, there's very little advertisement or acknowledgement about the diversity of the career or the industry in general. I mean, the military has some really great ads that go out and they show the great clips, and you can see the diversity of it. But BC Ferries doesn't run ad campaigns. C-SPAN doesn't run ad campaigns. The tug and barge companies don't run ad campaigns. The pile and barge guys don't. So there's a disconnect between how vibrant of a community it is and how tricky it is to kind of find the information, or how much information is disseminated to younger people. It's so broad. Every time I go to a meeting with my peers on the West Coast and they start talking about what they do and how they operate and the different ebb and flow of their work. P.S. I also love how many ocean-related, not puns, but expressions are like ebb and flow. So I talk to Coast Guard people and they're working 28 on, 28 off. And I talk to C-SPAN people and they could go for a couple months at a time and back. Deep Sea does different kinds of work. We do different kinds of schedules. So there's no one platform that is uniform across the industry. And so it really is something that people have to kind of catch onto or hear a little bit of one of the companies in almost a business or a news or a great picture. I mean, we have a really good Instagram account, just saying, and you kind of start to see what that industry lends itself towards. But it's a difficult industry to advertise because it's so broad.
Cove has done some research on this, and research that came out a couple of years ago, and it was centered around what are the perceptions of the industry, the maritime industries, and the perceptions were that it's dark and gloomy and it's a dirty business. People would think, at least on the east, it's offshore oil and gas, as an example. So changing those perceptions with young people has been one of the markers of some of the programming that we do. So getting the word out. I think that, there's still not enough of these types of forums and more advertisement opportunities and examples of leaders where there are more women in the sector. We have a great panel here. We need more of these women to showcase them and demonstrate to younger people that it's a wide variety of different jobs, and it's also they can see themselves. So if they see me, or if they see Suzanne or someone else, they start to identify that it's a potential route for them to take. But without that visibility in front of them, speaking from my career as an engineer, it's not always obvious. Unless you see someone either like yourself or someone that you can look up to kind of follow in their path. So yeah, I think as an industry, probably need to do a lot better job at advertising or using all the means that we have to enable people to choose a career in the maritime space.
There are recurring concerns expressed in studies presented by a number of international organizations about women's conditions, especially in the shipping industry. I'm sure the experience is very different in the Royal Canadian Navy or the Canadian Coast Guard or the cruise industry. So I'm just going to talk about the shipping industry, and I think it's important, the clarification, because there are many differences between activities in the industry. The approach is very different, the background, the training, and of course, the objectives are different as well. So in shipping industry, there are 4 important challenges for women, 3, let's say. Gender stereotyping, working conditions, and competitive salaries and career advancement. So the stereotype is a perception that jobs in this industry are meant only for men and require a skill set more associated with them. But advances in technology are changing this perception. These technological improvements replace the regular physical demands imposed by some of these jobs. So the supply of the skilled labor, especially in technology, is considered as a significant opportunity to promote women's full participation, and then an opportunity to reduce gender inequalities. Also, the gender stereotype can be changed by promoting more female role models in the industry. Like my colleagues today, they can encourage more women's participation and can dissipate the idea that the industry is not inclusive.
Sorry, I'm just going to add to that, you know, I think the reality is too that we need programming that is directed at reducing those stereotypes, getting more role models in place, and it has to be, you know, it has to be objective based, and so more organizations that are rolling that out. I mean, a lot of people don't like mandates or quotas or anything like that, but a form thereof to ensure that women are not guarded by the stereotypes that Alexandra mentioned. I think we have to get over that barrier and just push more women into these sectors through programs, through supports. I mean, you just don't throw them, especially when there are those concerns, but with supports in place so that they're successful.
Yeah, I was just going to comment and say that I think a misconception about the maritime industry is that sometimes we think as women, perhaps we're not welcome there. And I know a large part of my job is, you know, going on board the ships, going into dry dock, going to places where there are no other women except myself. And generally I'm the first woman they've encountered, first woman talking to. And there are instances where there is discrimination, but most of the time, those are very few, I should say. Most of the time, they just don't know what to do with a woman. And I think, you know, recently I've become a mom, and when we're all moms at the playground, we talk very easily to one another. And then a dad shows up and we're all like, you know, what do we say? What's going on, right? And I was messaging with one of my son's fathers recently, and we're arranging a play date for our child. And then I just asked him, I said, but what is your wife's phone number? I'd like to message her. And I kind of realized, you know, it is a very similar situation, right? We don't often think of it that way because, you know, it seems to be one directional, that women are kind of there wondering, why are these guys acting weird around me, right? But sometimes it can just be that they've never encountered a woman before. The same way when we're moms at the playground, we don't know what to do when a dad shows up, right? So sometimes it's not as negative or as harsh as we think. And my experience is that generally after working in that environment for some time, people are very happy and open to having a woman there, a new face, a new perspective, you know, someone with a different skill set or different mentality than just the same old people coming through. So I want to be very encouraging to the women that they are welcome in the industry and people are happy to have you.
So speaking to that point, and what Melanie said and Alexandra said, this is also a very cultural thing, right? It's like you know, we have like you said, this men not knowing how to interact with women in a job where they've mostly been around men. So I was wondering, you know, in your current position or in previous positions, what have you seen that's being advanced in terms of changing these cultural things? Because we can talk about, you know, we need programs like this, but are there things that you're seeing currently that are being done that has really improved how culturally we view women in the industry?
Yeah, well, I think the important thing, and Melody mentioned this, that we just get women into those positions and they keep going. And I think it's really important also for women to ask for what they need and what they want and understand that they're coming into a system, you know, in any industry, actually, it's not just the maritime industry, but the workforce, you know, the way we work right now, our working hours in offices is really a social construct that is set up during the Industrial Revolution. You know, it's 2020, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's not the Industrial Revolution anymore. Times have changed, right? Women are in the workforce. We have families and we want to continue traveling and going on site. And those options are not available for a lot of women. So we need to ask our employers and say what our needs are, what we want, and trust our gut that what we're asking for is okay. And so we continue to lobby on our behalf and just be encouraged that, you know, if I'm a mom and I want to be with my kids or I need time to work from home, it's okay for me to ask. There's nothing wrong with me asking or talking about that. And just that women need to keep going up the ranks and also being role models and showing up for one another in sessions like this, whether it's private mentorship or wherever we are, and just continue to stick together. So
we did some really great Meet the Crew videos that we have up on our corporate website and our Facebook page that introduce you to members of our crew, a number of whom are female. So we have one of our chief engineers, her name is Jody, and her sister is a captain with us, and so we have a video discussing kind of their careers and kind of the background of what they've done. We do a lot of work promoting people internally, so we have the luxury of having people who can come on board vessels as part of our customer service catering group, and they can see what those other careers look like. So we have the opportunity to expose them to life as a deckhander, as an engine room assistant, or in the engine room, prior to almost committing to a program, or just really opening their eyes to the fact that, you know, all these careers exist in the marine industry. I think we have probably one of the highest percentages of female officers and staff really across the country. And a big part of that reason is because of some of the barriers previously mentioned. You know, the absolute luxury of working at BC Ferries is our motto, sea by day, home by night. So 95% of our crew go to work and go home at night, which is a very different, you know, work schedule than the majority of marine employers. Now, we're not an employer for everyone, and there's certainly things that we don't offer people. But the simple fact that we can schedule people to be able to go home at night, it's a lot easier for women who want to have families, or who have community involvement, or who want to stay connected to family, or whatever rationale or reason they have to be, you know, frequently at home and on land. You know, it does kind of ease the burden of choosing that as a career and not being able to have that lifestyle that you'd like to have as well. And so I think employers, you know, one of the challenges they have is, and I'm not saying just for females, but who's the caregiver, and how that role has been changing and evolving. You know, I think a lot more men than nowadays who traditionally may not have stayed at home. Elizabeth, like your dad at the playground, you know, they now might have child rearing responsibilities or elder care that they need to be responsible for. And so where often and traditionally in, you know, this very, very, very ancient career, you know, men often would get on a ship and leave and come back, you know, a year or so later. One of our superintendents tells the story of when he went away to sea a number of years ago. It just cracks me up. He was from the UK, went away to sea for a couple of years, came home and opened the door, and his mom had moved. So, you know, you need to look at ways that you can support people in their outside work life as well as their inside work life. So there's a lot of responsibilities on employers to kind of look at the whole picture of what an employee does versus just the 8, 10, 12, 16-hour shift that they do at work.
So speaking to the work-life balance, I wonder if maybe Melanie and Suzanne, being in the Royal Canadian Navy, what are I mean, I suppose Melanie, you haven't been in the Navy for quite some time, but maybe Suzanne, because you're currently in the Navy, to speak a little bit about how the Navy is supporting a more work-life balance. I mean, I imagine it's quite difficult, but has there been sort of accommodations that have been made as of late, or?
Sure, I can speak to that, and I think I can come at it from a slightly different angle because I'm a single mom. So you know, from my perspective, going to sea, you know, the Navy supported me in going to sea because there are a lot of support services through our military family resource centers that are available, and also. At that time, my kids were able to live with their dad. And certainly traveling, because my family was in Ottawa and I was going to sea on the coast. And so I would travel back from the coast to visit them as well. And the Navy also has these what are called Tiger Cruises. It's not a cruise. It's not. It's where families or people from the public could come and spend a day at sea with the Navy, and so families get exposed to what we actually do, and it helps them understand exactly what the environment is, why we're going out there, and it really portrays the vastness of the ocean and the reason why we need to secure it, right? And all of the important, you know, commercial and economic reasons why that is. They can literally see all the container ships that are, you know, coming alongside. And another way that I've been supported is just having frank discussions about my career aspirations and goals, and managing the geographic location, the timing of when moves happen. And as an engineer, I've been fairly fortunate that, well, first of all, in the Navy, you kind of have a little bit of knowledge of your destiny. So it's either one coast or the other, or in Ottawa. So these are all fantastic places to live, let me tell you. Compared to the Army, yeah, the Navy has it made. And as an engineer, it becomes even like a little bit more stable once you reach a certain rank level in your career, because most of the engineering work and projects is done in Ottawa, out of Ottawa. And you still get a lot of opportunity to do some traveling, to do a lot of collaboration. And another thing, as a single parent and a mother, that's made it a little bit easier to be in the Navy is that I see all of the measures that we're taking to really make it an inclusive environment. And it is a long time coming, a long time coming. But there have been, we've literally changed the names of certain ranks. We acknowledge that like there's never been any difference in pay scale. But we acknowledge that there's implicit bias in training and advancement opportunities, and we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible. We're putting out a lot of media around the opportunities of women who are in actual jobs that need to be shared with the public, right? So that people, as Melanie said, they can see themselves in those roles. And you know, we're not great at advancing technology and technical solutions rapidly. It's a highly regulated industry, even on the military side. But I would, venture to say that we are very intent on modernizing the fleet, and that includes modernizing all of our business tools, which makes collaboration and remote working a little bit better. And in some instances, we've had families who were military couples who needed to move for one of the partners' careers, and we keep them together, but then just allow the other partner to work remotely if that's what had to happen. And so we have accommodations in that sense.
That's really great to hear. That's very exciting, because I definitely didn't want this panel to be like only negative. So it's really awesome to hear the different accommodations, such as remote working. And so to kind of continue on sort of a more positive bent as well, you've talked about not having that many women, when you go onto your jobs, you may not see as many women, but I do wonder what role mentorship from other women and a support network of women has helped you in your careers, or how you've seen that really support advancements in gender equality in the sector.
I've had some really great mentors, both women and men, but I'll speak to the women, and it hasn't been through official programs. It's basically been when I've achieved a next rank level, and I suddenly look around and there are fewer and fewer women at that same rank level, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit. So I would go out and seek other women at that rank level that I could speak to, and kind of share those experiences. But you do in the Navy, it's not a formal program. You're not automatically paired with somebody. You do have to seek it out. It is a very kind of personal venture, so to speak. But I think that like panels such as these are excellent venues to be able to connect with people. So I think that this was really exciting for me. That it was really cool, and not only I would say not only women in the industry, not only women in the military, but women. Not only women in the military or public sector, but also women out in the industry that you could talk to as well. So just because to me, like everything, most of the communication, most of my connections were through the military. But I think, once I kind of got over those, internal barriers, I looked around to the broader industry, and there are other women out there to reach out to.
So it's a very personal venture. You have to really kind of seek out and decide, to seek out a female mentor. But I'm wondering, at BC Ferries or Cove or C-SPAN or Green Nautical Miles, are there mentorship opportunities? Are there sort of programs in place to support younger colleagues? It doesn't have to necessarily be that they're mentored by women, but I'm just wondering, like, what are the avenues you have at your own workplaces that are supporting young employees as they rise up in the sector?
We don't have a formal mentorship program per se at BC Ferries, but what we do have is a lot of public recognition of kudos to women that are in different positions. We have a group of 7 female captains. At one point, there was articles in our employee newsletter. They are constantly reaching out to up and coming employees who are looking at different positions in the sector. And so there's a lot of informal mentorship. And we also, of course, we're promoting the OPP funding that you were mentioning earlier for women and First Nations to get a Bridgewatch ticket. And so I did a lot of presentations up and down the coast. We have employees that live in 36 different locations all over BC. And so we had an opportunity to speak to some of our employees who may be terminal staff or working in, like I said, that catering customer service group, to apply for some funding for programming and that. And it's just, there's enough understanding of who to go to and the publicity based on a lot of our internal communications that people are comfortable enough reaching out. We have a culture that allows for people to connect with somebody at any different level. It's not like you must go to this level and then this level. And, it's a really open, engaged group because, we're transporting passengers back and forth, and our employees are often going back and forth when times aren't weird. People at customer service would go up to somebody that they know, who's in a uniform, who's from the deck department, and they just ask questions. And so that's really great to see. One thing that stands out in my mind is I was doing a relocation of one of our vessels from our fleet maintenance yard to up north. I got invited to be part of that. And we had a smaller group of employees that were just getting the vessel back up and running. And this one young lady in catering was asking me, about career opportunities and because I was in recruiting. So I chatted with her a bit, found out her interest, and Suzanne, you'll be happy to know she's now in year 2 at BCIT in her engineering diploma. So it really, really drew her in, and she saw it as a really great opportunity. So it's just, there's a lot of informality in how our company operates and a lot of opportunity for open dialogue.
I have never been part of sort of a formal mentoring program. And at C-SPAN, because I am in a shore-based position, generally you are assigned to a mentor. It's typically been my manager or someone who is a little bit senior to me. But usually it's just ended up, because we work in ship operations and we're very busy, it's just a lot of working side by side on similar projects. It's just your coworker. And sometimes there's not always that connection for actual mentorship. It took me a while to think about and also learn as I've been growing what it means to kind of find a mentor. Because when we go to women's seminars, or even talks on how to advance your career, they say, find a champion, find a mentor. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And so in my learning process, what I've learned is that a mentor isn't always one person. And I would strongly encourage young people or anyone at any point in their career to just find people who you get along with and continue to keep up a relationship with them. But as opposed to your friends in your day-to-day life, this is people who share similar career interests or, values for work, values for career, for life, but on a professional level. And many of my people who I consider to be mentors are men. And I'm thankful to recently, in the last couple of years, have more women. But when I started my career at C-SPAN or got this job, actually how that connection happened was through one of my university professors. He needed sailors to help him race his boat for, Wednesday night racing. And I went out and we got to know each other and we're talking, as did all the crew on the boat. And when I was graduating, I was talking to him about how I was looking for different opportunities and, where would I go? I was kind of sick of designing boats, and was there more to shipping? And he said, oh yeah, I did my master's with this guy who works at C-SPAN in Vancouver. Again, give me your resume. pass it to him, we'll see what would happen. And I didn't even know about C-SPAN ship management. A lot of people, when they think about C-SPAN, they think about C-SPAN North Vancouver, which is completely different than who I work for. I work for a container ship operator. We run a fleet of 112 operating container ships. I didn't even know that was in Canada, the world's largest ship manager at that time. And several months later, here I was moving to Vancouver and going into this job. And then recently, about a year ago, I was approached by another colleague in the network. He is working on sort of inventing and designing wind ship or sail assist technology. And he said, oh, I know someone at the Vancouver Economic Commission. They want to put together a coalition of people in the maritime industry to work towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Would you meet with him and talk with him? And the original contacts, we don't really work in a similar industry or field, but we just always kept in touch. And now, a year later, after him making that introduction, we formed the Vancouver Maritime Centre for Climate. And we're a coalition working, we're a formal registered not-for-profit organization, and we're working towards meeting our mandate of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And again, a year ago, I didn't know what that was or where that would take me, and yet here I am. And I think just through maintaining those relationships with people who have similar interests and ideologies, then I've been able to explore different areas of my career where I didn't think would end up. And also, just like our friends in real life, we might go to one friend to talk about, in my case, mom issues. I might go to another friend to talk about housing issues or what food are you preparing or whatever you want to talk about. Is same thing with your career. I go to one of my contacts to talk about, what are you doing on your ships? How are things going in your industry? Another one of my contacts, what are you doing for environment, this sort of thing. And we might go for lunch, grab a coffee, something, but it's not always that one formal mentor that's going to be the end all be all answer to all your questions and provide you with all the door opening or the pulling along that you need in your career. And the benefit is once you build those relationships and you get to a certain point in your own career, then you can start to connect with people who need that same sort of help and mentorship as well, which is really great.
Yeah, I really like what you and Dana and Suzanne have said, because I think when people have told me, find a mentor, it's quite intimidating and you don't really know where to look. And then you kind of go to the first person that you think will be the best person to mentor you because they're, very highly regarded in their field. And that could end up being quite uncomfortable and disappointing if they're not prepared to, do that, to be in that position. And so I do like the idea of really looking to people that you actually get along with, and that mentorship, I think that's something that we don't learn. It's sort of like go to these network meetings, meet a bunch of people, and then see what happens. And it's
because I say like some contacts I've met and we just talk about things we have in common at networking events. And then 2 or 3 years later, I find out, oh, this person is a retired rear admiral in the Canadian Navy. Oh, wait, this person is, the Secretary General of the Canadian Ship Owners Alliance. Oh, I didn't know. We were just there talking to one another, getting along. We kept in touch. And then later, when you need that help, you've already developed that relationship and, you have a personal connection with that person in your professional network. So I strongly encourage just hanging around with people that you actually genuinely like and get along with. So.
Well, I have to say that as a founder of Green Nautical Minds, I had the great opportunity to participate in the World Maritime Day 2019, a conference about the empowerment of women in the maritime community. So it was so inspiring, women from more than over 70 countries. It was a wow moment. So all the 2019 was an opportunity to raise awareness of the importance of gender equality in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, working with various maritime stakeholders to help create an environment in which women are identified and selected for career development opportunities in maritime administrations and ports. It was incredible.
Oh, wow. So I was reading about the World Maritime Organization at conference last year, and it was really fascinating to see what the takeaways that they had found. So as we're kind of continuing on your experiences in your career, I want to know, what is the most exciting thing about your job currently? Like, what is the thing that gets you up every morning and really motivates you?
Well, you're never going to have the same day twice. Yeah. Just the uniqueness of the industry. And, I've worked in my career for a bunch of different industries, and I have never seen an industry where there's this much passion. Like, we have people on, and I'm sure, Suzanne, you may have seen this too. There'll be some people who work on one of our vessels, or with C-SPAN too, for 20, 30 years, and we're going to put in one of the new vessels, like one of our new electric hybrids. I'm retiring. you took away my ship. I'm no longer working here. It's just, it's so much a part of who they are. And I would bet you 80%, if not more, of our deck captains boat in their leisure time. Like, it's just, it's all encompassing. And it's fascinating to hear how integrated they are as a person with the industry.
So it's simple for me. I get to be involved in some really cool stuff and works with some really cool people every day. So, some days, my mind kind of goes like this, and I'm like, how is everyone trying to figure this out, right? So there being the fact that we're all involved in offshore work, it's not easy, it's challenging. So there's a lot of smart people that are involved in this industry. And so it's fascinating to work with them, whatever piece they're involved in, whether it's marketing or onboard ships or design or whatnot. Like, there are a lot of smart people involved. So for me, it's really gets me jazzed up to be able to work with those people on a regular basis and come up with different ways of doing things that just make a lot of sense and are more forward looking, when we're looking at the future and sustainability and where we want our girls or my children, my daughter to work in 20 years. Like, I want a different future for her. So that's really exciting to see that everyone has a piece and is playing a role in developing that future.
I would say the ability to create opportunities. And so, it's one thing to look for opportunities and be involved in it, and it's another thing to be actually part of creating opportunities and putting them out there, and just having a lot of trust in the maritime industry, the maritime community, to rise to the occasion, and lead something into the future. So that's really exciting for me.
Well, I have to say the ocean's role in the industry, also the fact that it's very international. You have different legislation, nationalities. You are in communication with companies, ports around the world. I think this is something that I really love about the marine industry, that is very international.
My career has very much changed over time. Even in the time I've been at Seaspan, in the first 5 years I've been there before I had children, I did a lot of traveling. And if you take a look at my photos on my website there, you can see all the times I was in dry dock, and you get to see these absolutely huge ships out of water. And just when you're, walking up to the ship and there's the fresh smell of the ocean coming off the vessel and the sun's rising up over the side of the dry dock, you can probably tell how I'm talking about it. Like, it really just motivates you to be there. It's a very cool, unique experience. But then after I had children, my job became more focused to stay in the office. I still did some traveling, but also I sort of matured in my knowledge and expertise regarding container ships and how they operate. And what was really cool for me was to look at the ships, and I would think of an idea, like maybe we could be doing this and cleaning the ships better, or using this new technology, or how are we writing this internal standard or procedure, or who's looking at this contract, or how we're doing business with this vendor, or what's happening on board the ships. And when I had that idea, because I worked for such a large company and with so many ships, I was able to take action and execute and implement that. So it's been very rewarding that I can call up vendors on the other side of the world and say, hey, what about changing your technology so it works this way? Can we advance this and implement these projects on our fleet? And they say, oh yeah, that's a great idea, let's go. And now I've been able to bring that to VMCC, where I have the local network background from working here in Canada and in British Columbia, but also bring the international players on board as well. And where we have the energy transition coming at us down the pipeline, it's just so very critical that we take action, not tomorrow, but literally yesterday, weeks ago. This is urgent. And to be able to set up and drive these projects, and then to see them take form and actually manifest in the industry, it really, gets me out of bed in the morning and keeps me motivated to continue on to do this, just because it's so interesting, but also for the next generation. Now, as a mother, I look at my two sons and I think, we're going to do some great things here in shipping and leave a better place for you guys.
What I'm hearing is the creativity, the variety, diversity, the fact that it's internationally focused, that it's forward thinking, the number of different types of people you get to work with, the number of projects you get to work on. So those are all really great selling points. And I think all of you should be in charge of marketing for the marine sector, because these are, a lot of these things I think a lot of people don't think about when they think about the marine sector. Because like I think Melanie said, advertising is often focused on how the dark and gritty it is, which I'm sure that's part of it, but there's so much so much other interesting things going on. So we're at 3:30 now, so I'd like to leave some time for questions if anybody has some, but just kind of one or two last questions. Where can people start looking for opportunities? I know that you said it's a lot of informal, you know somebody who knows somebody, or you grew up in the industry, but are there networks online or something where people can subscribe or anything like that, where they can actually kind of get updates? So for instance, there's a lot of policy job newsletters that I get sent because I come from a background in research and policies. There's something similar for the sector. I know it's quite vast, so you might not be able to speak to the entire sector, but.
I know there's a Master Mariner of Canada page on LinkedIn that has a lot of information that's kind of across the industry. I think that there are like IMO websites, so the International Marine Organization, where you can look for a more global perspective. And then, I mean, when I speak to students about, how to look for jobs and stuff as a recruiter, I always say, just be insanely curious. Ask all of the questions, watch the videos that you can, look up a company that you didn't think you were interested in. You have to drive the process yourself a little bit and just kind of see where you can start getting it. If you were to type in, Marine Industry Canada into Google, you'd probably get video links to a bunch of stuff that you had no idea existed. So just, remain insanely curious and just keep plugging away.
So along the lines of that, I think that like what we're demonstrating too is that the maritime industry is pretty big. So if you're looking for an opportunity, you do need to do your homework and try to identify, is it in law? Are you just in maritime law? And then there's a suite of different organizations there or companies that need that expertise. Or if you're a policy research, well, there's not-for-profits, there's a lot of government work in this space. Or if you want to go in the Navy. So there's so many different parts to the maritime industry. It's hard to say there's just one way to go about it. I think you need to do a bit of research, start your networking. We all know that networking is so important. So start learning more and more about the different areas that you're interested in. And then I don't know what the audience is like here, but if you're in university, like I'm going to put a plug in here for Dal. There's a lot of research going on there in the ocean space. What a great opportunity to kind of expand your wealth. I will also say from our perspective, we do programming and we offer curated opportunities for interns. And we talked about the multi-disciplines that are involved in maritime industry. Well, that's how we curate our interns. It's not just engineers. It's not just this or that. It's a grouping of different interns that work with different companies so that they can start getting a feel for the industry and the type of companies that they may want to work with. So that's good opportunities as well. Like there are programs like we have at Cove, but other programs too out there that can at least get people's feet wet within the industry.
I would say even choosing a university program that offers a chance for work terms, internships, is a really good way to get exposure into different fields and sort of decide which area you want to be in.
I'll put a plug in for the Navy, of course. Is that we do have programs that pay for your education, and so it's a pretty sweet deal. Having lived through it myself and benefited greatly from it, not only for my undergrad, but also for ongoing qualifications, business qualifications, and my master's degree. So this idea of paying out of pocket for education is completely foreign to me, and I will happily market that out there.
Just to say that here in Canada, through the Oceans Protection Plan, they have a marine training for women, Inuit and Indigenous women that reflect traditional knowledge and learning needs of isolated and remote coastal communities for those women who are maybe in some regions in Canada. It's called, let me check, Oceans is the Marine Training Oceans Protection Plan. So you can find it maybe in the website, like Transport Canada. You can find all the information.
Okay. Well, I'll move it to questions if anybody has any questions for our 5 panelists.
A question actually for Suzanne. Yeah. Suzanne, I'm just wondering, what do your sort of day-to-day and week-to-week work life look like? What sort of position are you in right now that you actually do on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, I'd be happy to answer that. Thanks for the question. So I am working from home right now, and thanks to some remote capabilities that we've got going on, and I live in Ottawa. So I'm doing mostly projects and programs right now, and my day to day is I get up. There's a frantic rush through breakfast with children and getting everybody logged into their computers, and then we kind of go to our separate rooms, do our own thing. We reconvene for lunch and kind of just like throw lunch together and pretend like we had a plan for lunch, but and then we get back to work, and then I always try to do fitness every day. So that's something that in the military we try to emphasize is a healthy lifestyle, and fitness. So that's always something that I always try to include in my day somehow. And then it's normal family life after working hours.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were still going to see it all and how that was influencing your day-to-day, but I guess with the pandemic right now, the operations have changed. But it sounds like your position is shore-based.
My position is shore-based, but I do have some colleagues that continue to go to sea. And right now, it's pretty intense in terms of preparation. Just because not only are the sailors required to quarantine, but the support services have to be managed in such a manner that it's safe for the potential exposure is contained. But I have to say, a lot of the support services, they quite often they're not in close proximity to people, or they have to wear PPE anyways. So it's been it's been workable, but pretty challenging to manage it at the base and formation level.
Sorry, Mara, I was just going to jump in and kind of just have a thought for those that listen in, because all of the women here and many others work really hard, and so it's really important. We've all built a big sense of resilience over the years because it's never easy. So whether it's the maritime industry or not, building a career, having kids, balancing that, leading, etc. It's not easy. So it's just important to know that experience helps, resiliency helps, supports are extremely, extremely important. So whether they come in the form of mentors or working for a company that's very supportive to your needs in that moment in time, or that you have family that's available to help you, when we do have to work long hours at some points, or I have, and I'm sure all of us have. So it's not all rosy, but we work really hard and we're all very capable as women. So just wanted to mention that, because sometimes I think, we don't say that enough.
No,
that everybody works really hard and have become very resilient throughout their careers for the many challenges that this industry pose, or just a career. Period.
Yeah, that's definitely bring up, especially during this time right now where resilience and is incredibly important.
I just want to second that. So there was, and I'll share with you that at one point in my career, it was a pretty critical point, and I had just had my second son, and I was on parental leave. So then the opportunity to go back to sea to do my head of department tour as an engineer on a warship came up, and I said, well, no, like I just had my son, and they said, oh yeah, we understand. And I said, but I want you to come back and ask me again at this point. and they did. But you kind of have to take that for yourself, right? And don't get lost, right? So that they remember you.
Very important advice. Thank you.
I'm gonna give my really generic, but I think really valuable advice as a recruiter, and it's for all women. Often when I'm talking to a woman about, you know, what did you cook for dinner? What do you do for a living? Where did you study? Women often start with, oh, I just. And so I say to women, and I interrupt women in the middle of conversations all the time, and I'm like, quit justing yourself. You don't ask a man what he does for a living, and he doesn't say, oh, I'm just a lawyer. Like generally it doesn't happen. So if you find yourself justing yourself, stop it. No more adjusting needed. Just own what you do and be proud of it, and take that just out.
Thank you. That's probably some advice that I could certainly also follow. This has been a really great conversation, and I'd like to thank Alexandra, Suzanne, Melanie, Elizabeth, and Dana for taking the time out of their day to join. I'm sure you've been on tons of virtual panels and webinars over the past couple of weeks and months, so Ships to Shores really appreciates your participation, and we appreciate the advice and the words of encouragement that you've offered our participants.